Hello, and welcome to Opt to Thrive, episode 16, my personal menopause journey. Why menopause, the musical, pissed me off and what I did about it to change my health trajectory, reclaim my energy and vitality, and lose the menopause belly.
Welcome to Opt to Thrive, your go-to podcast for women's wellness in midlife, designed to educate, support, and inspire you to live your very best life. And now your host, Dr. Karina Sims.
Hello. So today is a pretty spectacular day out there. So the sky, I know I keep saying this, but we do have pretty amazing weather. The sky is absolutely sparkling, crystal blue. It is a stunning spring day. I've had my son home for the weekend. He's getting ready to leave the country in a week. So both of my children will be living overseas very soon. My son and his girlfriend are going to spend our summer, but the Japanese winter in Japan, doing some work on the ski slopes and enjoying some skiing and some snowboarding. They're both pretty eager to try. And so it's been fun. We've had him home. We spent some time together, went up the river, spent the day at the brewery, which is one of the things that, people do around here, which is really lovely. There was a live band, and we actually took the boat up, which was quite fun, through the creeks. It was a bit cold, but it's the beginning of the season, so it was just a nice day to spend together. So today, I am recording this episode. It's a little bit less than a week from my 54th birthday. So there's a few reasons, but I've decided I think it's a good time, especially on the back of the last two podcast episodes, because it really fits right in, to share my own personal menopause story. So I've shared a lot of, other aspects of my story, but the menopause journey in particular, I think, is really a story that I would like to tell. So it was just over a year ago that I made some pretty significant changes as part of managing my own personal health at this stage in my life. And a lot of things are, kind of coming together, coming full circle right now. And it's a really fun, super exciting time for me. I'm feeling really invigorated, and I'm feeling strong and healthy, empowered, inspired, and just so motivated to reach all of my new goals, all these new goals I've set for this half of my life. And one of these goals is to be my strongest, best functioning, most energetic, healthiest self that I can be. And I want to share this part of my journey with all of you as an example of getting through this stage of life feeling your absolute best, physically, emotionally, functionally. So I want to start by going back to early last year, so 2023. My husband and I had just bought a property that we really had not planned to buy. We had recently invested our money into some other vineyards. We had some small properties and we added to that, and my husband then stopped working a normal kind of day job and became a full-time viticulturalist running the vineyards. But this property came up and we both fell in love with it. So we decided that we were just going to make it work. And we kind of, dug deep and really pulled together all the resources that we possibly could to make it happen. The property has this old farmhouse on it. You've heard me talk about it if you've been listening. I have this bit of a love affair with my old farmhouse. But when we looked at the property, the agent actually made a comment, something like, "You wouldn't buy this property for the house." It's an old house. The toilet, in fact, was one of the main issues for me to start with. It's separate from the shower and the sink, in the tub, which is normal for an Australian house. Lots of houses have the two separate rooms, but the toilet's actually on the back porch. So it's at the other end of the house. And before we moved in, it actually just had a toilet in there. There was and a shelf. There was no sink. And so if you wanted to wash your hands, then you'd have to go into the kitchen or you'd have to go to the other end of the house. So that was one of the things that I really wanted to fix. And then the other thing was that the back porch where the toilet was didn't have a door on it. And most people are quite aware that here in Australia, we've got, I don't know, I think I heard something like 9 of the deadliest snakes or something along those lines. Anyway, we've got something called a brown snake. It's pretty common around here. And I had asked the previous owner if she had been concerned at all that maybe a brown snake might find its way into the toilet. She said, after kind of having a little giggle at me, said, "Oh yeah, there was one in there last week." So that was probably the first priority for me, was getting a door on the back porch. So needless to say, there were a lot of things I absolutely loved about the house. It has original old wood floors, and of course, my now favorite place on earth, the sun porch. The kitchen had seen better days though, and it was in need of an update. But we had used all of our resources just to get into the property. The grapes have not been great over the last couple of years. We've lost some money, as many grape growers have, on the vineyard. So I knew it was going to be a minute before we could do any really significant renovations to the house. Lucky for me, just before buying this property in the year prior, I'd started a new hobby, playing with woodworking. I had done some kind of, small projects, making some wood platters for friends. I made one of my close girlfriends a jewelry box. And then I moved up to making a farmhouse dining table that I used some old floorboards that my husband had salvaged from somebody's reno to make. And it was just the coolest table. And I think, this table was looking for a house, and here we'd found it. So being the resourceful kind of girl I am, I had an idea. The bones of the kitchen were good. The craftsmanship was good quality. So I decided I could just kind of rip it all apart and just use the bones of it and create what I wanted. Just replace the countertops and make some new shaker-style cabinet doors. I YouTubed it. Didn't look that hard. I was invigorated with this creative energy, and without telling my husband, because I knew that he would try to shut it down before I got it started, I snuck over to the property and I ripped out half the kitchen. Thought the worst that could happen was that we'd really just have to find a way to get somebody to help me put it back together. That's the worst that can happen, and live in a demolished kitchen for a while. I have this philosophy. I think that there are times when it's best just to ask for forgiveness rather than permission. And this was one of those times. So I went ahead and I kind of just ripped out half the kitchen. I opened it all up, and I kind of, had a loose idea of what I wanted it to end up with. But then I got myself into a bit of a pickle, because I thought that we had plenty of time to kind of sort things out before we moved in, because I didn't think we'd be moving in for a little while. One of the resources that we used to get this place was selling the old place that we were in, and it sold reasonably quickly. And the people who bought it, turns out they needed to get into it straight away. So we had to close and get out pretty quick, a lot quicker than I had anticipated. So here I was with a demolished kitchen, and now a pretty short timeline to get it sorted out. Now, I'm telling this story because this is where I started to get into a bit of trouble with my weight, and when things started to go really unpleasant for me in terms of this whole menopause transition. So during this time, I was obviously really busy working, outside of my work hours, working my hardest just to try to get this kitchen put together, amongst other little projects that I did around the house, and, make sure that it had a good new coat of paint in most of the rooms before we moved in, that kind of thing. So I pretty much gave up all of my exercise outside of my Sunday ride and swim with the girls, which I just, really, really try not to miss. I spent all my spare time getting things sorted in the kitchen. And I also, ripped out some carpet and knocked out a wall. I learned how to lay floating floorboards, and I made a new bathroom vanity. I have an old cupboard that fit quite nicely into the toilet so that we could put a sink on top of it and get the plumber in and hook it up. And now we had a sink in the toilet, which was really cool. I also created this super cool little coffee nook off of the dining room, which it was just this kind of odd little room. I think in times past it was a laundry room, and there might have been a wall and a door outside. I'm not sure, but turned that into a little coffee nook and a pantry because I had gotten rid of a lot of cupboard space. So I really needed a pantry. So I was a busy girl. My creme de resistance was a kitchen island. I used some of the cupboards that I had ripped out of the kitchen and kind of pieced together a square island for the middle of the kitchen. And then I made like a great big cutting board, so a butcher's block out of some Tasmanian oak, and made a countertop for this great big kitchen island. And it's one of my favorite things in the whole house, really. And it's so convenient and it works so well. I learned how to hang doors. I bought a few new doors. That back porch got a door. I learned how to put door handles in. That's an interesting job. YouTube is amazing. Like, I have just learned everything from YouTube, to be honest. My husband and I had a project we did together, yet for about 2 minutes. He was interested in helping me. I'm not exactly sure where that came from. I think he was a little inspired for, like I said, about 2 minutes. But I made a barn-style door to go off of the room, off of the dining room. So I had to open that up. As I said, knocked out a wall. And anyway, let a lot more light into it. And my husband made the fixture for the barn door to slide on, which is it's just super cool. Anyway, all of these things are probably half of the reason I just absolutely love and adore the house, because we just put so much love and effort into it. So it was probably a few good months. Well, no, it was a few good months of my time spent doing all of these things and not exercising as I normally would. And, not really paying a whole lot of attention to what I was eating. And I had gotten into a habit of drinking my Sauv Blanc on a regular basis. It's a big, long, hard day. And at the end of the day, I really fancied a glass of wine, usually while I was making tea, and then maybe another one while I was having tea. So there was that. And then there's this background of my typical pattern of gaining weight over the winter. And then as the summer comes, I just take it off. And I've pretty much done that, pretty much my entire adult life. But this time, something happened that I wasn't picking up on at the time. I ended up putting on a bit more weight than I normally would. Now, I wasn't overly worried about any of this because I knew that I would just take it off again when I was ready. And because my 20-year med school reunion was coming up in the November, I thought that I would just do it before that, right? So August came along and I decided, okay, I think I'll get started and, get this weight off. And I decided that I would do some intermittent fasting because I had done that a few years ago and it worked really well. I responded very well. I really actually enjoyed intermittent fasting when I did it. I loved learning at that time that hunger was kind of like a contraction. It would come, I could watch it, it would peak, and then it would just dissolve away if I just sat with it long enough. And that's not something I had actually really realized before, because before, when I got hungry, it was kind of like, it felt almost life-threatening. I needed to eat. So I did learn some things from intermittent fasting before, and I did it for quite some time. And as I said, it worked really well. And then I do really love my breakfast. That was what I had normally skipped out when I did the intermittent fasting before. My eating window was like 1 to 9, which worked for me. But then I got back into the habit of eating my breakfast and, gave the intermittent fasting away. So I thought I'll go back to that. That worked really well. But this time it was really different. I felt different. I felt awful. I felt exceptionally hungry. And instead of feeling, energized and invigorated, I felt lethargic and just overall really uncomfortable. It certainly wasn't the same experience that I had had previously when it felt invigorating and easy, and the weight really pretty much had just fallen off. So I did this for about 3 weeks, and literally, I'm not like, I've never seen anything like it. Not one single ounce had moved from my body. I had increased my cardio. I was, really sticking with it. And I just couldn't even see an ounce move. This was nothing like my previous experience. And it was really weird. Never had I experienced anything like that before. In my past attempts to lose weight, by now I would have been down, a few weeks into it, at least a few pounds. And on the scale, one day would fluctuate from the next. And sometimes there are huge fluctuations on the scale. But this time, the scale refused to move. I thought maybe it was broken. I several times would pick something up and get back on it just as if it would actually move, because it literally was the exact same number for 3 weeks. It was like my body was saying, I am absolutely not moving from this spot, and you can't make me. Also at this point, I'd been on and off hormone treatment patches, having started them for hot flushes. But then the supply shortages came around, and around the same time, I stopped exercising and I was busy with the house. So I ended up just going off of it because I thought, I think I can just do this without medication. I don't think I really need it. And then I fell into this kind of hole. For my entire life, I had always been an amazing sleeper, but now I was really suffering, waking in the night, unable to get back to sleep for long periods of time. I had brain fog, which was affecting my confidence at work. I was struggling to remember the names of medications and medical conditions. My libido was pretty much non-existent, which was straining my relationship. I was experiencing unpredictable irritability with these waves of intense anger, and my underlying low-level anxiety was feeling at times like pretty much kind of unmanageable. And now here I was also with a substantial layer of fat over my entire body and maybe an extra one around my waistline that I'd not experienced before. So to sum it all up, I really felt like rat shit, to be honest. I knew the hot flushes and libido issues were related to the menopause, but I had not attributed the sleep to hormones because it wasn't the night sweats that were waking me up. I was just waking up. I didn't attribute the extreme irritability or the anxiety to the hormones because it just didn't occur to me at the time. Of course, I didn't know then what I know now. So I didn't appreciate how much mood can be impacted by menopause. And then right there, smack in the middle of me trying to get the weight off and being off the hormone replacement, I went with my girlfriends to see a musical theater production called Menopause. Menopause is a comedy about a few women going through menopause where they are poking fun at their experiences going through this stage. Well, I had a very strong negative reaction to this show. None of my girlfriends seemed to have the same reaction. None seemed to be bothered as much as I was. In fact, I think they all pretty much enjoyed it. But what I saw was a bunch of middle-aged, overweight women saying, you might as well just accept that this is life now and enjoy the snacking. I am fairly positive it was all probably part of my hormonally deranged brain at the time, but I was pretty pissed off. There's no way in hell I was going to sit back and enjoy the snacking and just let this happen to me. Surely there was a better way. I hated the way I felt, both physically and mentally. I was done. So me and myself, we had a little sit down and we had a little chat. I wanted to feel better both physically and mentally. I wanted my vitality, my energy, my libido, my sleep, and my body back. Some things were going to have to change. The first thing I did was acknowledge and accept that my body had over a pretty short period of time changed in ways that I no longer felt familiar with. I was going to have to find a new way to relate to and manage both my body and my brain. My future reality became very obvious to me. All of those things I'd been warning my patients about for years that we become at increased risk for after menopause, I was now at risk for. Heart disease, osteoporosis, obesity, diabetes, osteoarthritis, dementia. I accepted that my youth had gotten me to this point pretty much unscathed, but to live the best second half possible, I was going to have to make some changes. I see every day in my work as a GP what it looks like when a woman looks after herself and when she doesn't. The chronic pain, the dementia due to chronic small vessel changes, the fractured hips, the heart disease, the immobility, the strain on their families as they struggle to look after them. I could see a lot of suffering that was preventable. And right here, right now, felt like an opportunity to change my trajectory to live the best second half that I can. So just before my 53rd birthday, I decided not to worry about the weight loss and instead make some significant changes to set myself up for the long term. I knew that the more muscle you have, the more energy you'll burn, the more muscle, and the healthier the muscle, the better you'll process the glucose that's taken up from the foods we eat and help protect you from insulin resistance, which then helps protect you from obesity and diabetes. With all of the cardio and the slacking in the gym, I had very likely lost muscle. Priority one was going to have to be to build my muscle. So I decided from then and for the rest of my life, resistance exercise was going to be my priority, as was eating enough protein to support my muscle building and muscle maintenance. I decided the wine was not doing me any favors for my waistline or my sleep. That was a pretty hard one to swallow. I had to actually pay attention to that and see that for myself, that my sleep was affected by the alcohol. But then when I did, I could cut it back. I started prioritizing my fiber, nailing my fiber target of 25 grams a day. I looked at my sleep and I did some housekeeping there. I got stricter with my bedtime and wake up time, and I optimized my sleep environment. I got myself back on hormone treatment, and I plan to stay on it at this point until I'm at least 60. I had my testosterone levels checked. Turns out I had none. Like literally, I had none. I started testosterone therapy as well. And for nearly a year, I just focused on the basics, getting those right, making those second nature. And then about 4 months ago, I felt I was ready to start making a concerted effort to shed some body fat and do what is called a body recomposition or a body recomp. So a body recomp is just changing body fat mass and or muscle mass. So the composition of your body has changed, right? So I had built some muscle and now I wanted to get rid of some of the body fat because I still had a fair bit on. I hadn't really done anything other than spend the year focusing on building my muscle mass through progressive overload weight training in the gym. And now I felt I was ready to take off some of the fat while maintaining my muscle mass. I was feeling strong and I was feeling ready. I was consistently hitting both my fiber and my protein targets. I was sleeping better. I was managing my stress better and just overall feeling pretty good. So then, how was I going to go about doing this? Over the many years, I have tried all kinds of things when it came to getting the weight off and trying to find ways to keep it off. I quit sugar, I ate low fat, I tried the Atkins diet, the low glycemic index diet, calorie counting, Weight Watchers, and as I said before, intermittent fasting. I thought there had to be some kind of a trick, right? It turns out there isn't any real trick. It's actually pretty simple, and it's pretty simple science. It's the first law of thermodynamics. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. If you take in more energy than you use up, it must be stored. So if you take in more calories than you're using, then it'll go into fat stores. If you use more energy than you take in, you must take the energy you need from your stores. At this point, I'd been tracking my energy balance along with my protein and fiber, so I knew what my maintenance calories were going to be, meaning the amount of calories I could eat and not gain or lose any weight. So I found that number. I cut that number back by 20%, which is probably a little aggressive for some people, but felt manageable to me. And as you have probably realized, I'm a get it done kind of girl. So I wanted to get it done. But I also did not want to lose any of my precious muscle. So that 20% was pretty much what I felt was the maximum I could do without losing my muscle. I started by getting a body impedance scan the day that I decided to get to work on the fat loss. I did this at the local gym. So a body impedance scan is where you stand on a scale and you hold these handles, and then the machine sends an electric current through your body, and it estimates things like your lean muscle mass and fat mass and your weight. Now, the research I've done says, they're probably not extremely accurate as a one-off tool, but by doing them under as similar conditions as possible, I could use them as a rough measurement of my progress as I went. I found the scans to be a really good accountability tool and a really good motivator. I knew if nothing else, the weight on the scale would be accurate. So then once a month, I checked in with another scan on the same day of the week at the same time. I tried to keep the conditions pretty much the same. I also took some progress pictures wearing the same clothing on the same day. So I had some really good ways to measure my progress. It turns out I really did need these motivators. At this stage in life, weight absolutely did not come off as easy as it always had. And I was kind of expecting that, especially having had the experience with intermittent fasting that I'd already had and the research that I'd been doing. So I knew the progress was going to be slow, but it was excruciatingly slow. But eating with a focus on protein and fiber has made the whole process really pretty painless. In 4 months, my weight went down 10 pounds on the scale, but I lost nearly 5% body fat, and I didn't lose any of my muscle. In fact, I managed to put a little more on and get stronger. I'm seeing definition in my body. I feel strong. My blood pressure is good. My cholesterol profile is good. I have energy. My mood is stable. I'm feeling the best I've felt in a really long time. And best of all, it's truly sustainable. I have not felt hungry outside of a mealtime at all. In fact, I've had some pretty cool wins. With the high protein in my diet, I aim for about 120 to 130 grams a day now. And with the high fiber, some pretty miraculous things have happened for me. I've always been a sweet tooth. I can remember the very first time I had sugar cookie dough. I was in the first grade. We were making Christmas cookies at school. And it was seriously like one of those movies when two people kiss and the fireworks go off. That was like, I seriously remember it being like that. Something just like went off in my brain. It had such an impact on me that I've never forgotten it. I know that sugar is not technically addictive, but I do know that some people are more susceptible to the dopamine rush that can come from what we call hyperpalatable foods. So hyperpalatable foods are generally foods made from sugar, fat, and salt, and often they have some kind of carbohydrate like flour. So I've never been a real fruit eater because if I was going to have something sweet, it was not going to be what I once thought was being wasted on fruit. If it was a Snickers bar or an apple, it was going to be the Snicker bar every time. So eating in an energy balanced way, meaning balancing my energy intake in a way that was allowing my body to be in a deficit and dip into my fat stores, means that I have to be really intentional with what I'm eating, like a money budget. I have a food budget. And if I had a Snickers bar, which I could, if that's what I really wanted, then I just had to make everything fit. And that made it a lot harder to hit my fiber and my protein targets, which were my priorities, and still stay within my calorie goal. So the Snickers bar still really hasn't had a look in. I mean, I've had some desserts along the way. I've planned for those, and that's been great. I've managed to fit it in. It's been a choice. But it turns out eating this much protein and fibers actually made it really easy, so much easier than I ever dreamed it would be to opt for healthier choices. And I'm in a place now where I'm actually wanting like looking forward to eating fruit, which is just weird for me. It really tastes amazing. And if you look at the literature, it'll tell us that the evidence shows us the more we don't eat intense, sugary, sweet foods, the more naturally sweet foods increase in intensity. It also shows the more hyperpalatable foods we eat, the more we want. So by steering myself toward better choices to meet my energy budget, I inadvertently did what is called a pattern interrupt, which allowed me enough time away from the hyperpalatable foods to lessen the cravings that would normally perpetuate that cycle of eating more and wanting more. The protein leaves me full and satisfied and has really eliminated a lot of my food cravings. So now when I have an urge to eat something and I check in to see if it's truly hunger that I'm feeling, if it isn't, I have an easier time identifying why I'm having an urge. Sometimes it's just I'm feeling a bit anxious. Sometimes I'm wanting to connect with my husband or my friends or my family, or sometimes it's anxiety. Did I say that? Sometimes I'm bored. Sometimes I want to procrastinate, and sometimes it's anxiety. I'm getting a lot better at just sitting with those urges and just processing whatever emotions coming up for me. So that's been a real gift. With all of those other tricks I used in the past to lose weight, there really wasn't a what next strategy. And that was part of the big problem. It was pretty much just get the weight off and go back to what I was doing before. And that's the problem with most weight loss programs, is there is no strategy for after the weight is off. What's next, right? This time, I know I will be eating this way for the rest of my life. I want to eat this way. I'm enjoying eating this way. I can live the rest of my life eating this way. It is awesome. I also previously had been working mainly on what we call extrinsic motivators. So extrinsic motivators are things outside of yourself. Things like looking good for summer, wearing certain clothes. This time, though, it was the intrinsic rewards that have dominated my motivation. I want to feel good. I want to have plenty of energy. I want to feel strong and capable. I want a stable mood. I want to have better health. What we know, what the evidence tells us, is the more intrinsic rewards that we have to motivate us, the more likely it is that we're going to make long-term sustainable changes. So I hope that this has been helpful for you guys. I've really wanted to tell this story because I really wanted to illustrate that midlife does not have to be just sit back and accept it and enjoy the snacking. I mean, you know what? You can if you want. I mean, everything's a choice, right? As a GP, though, I encourage my patients to live their healthiest, best life that they can. And I am hopeful that I can motivate people to make those choices for themselves, because it does feel better to feel strong. It does feel better to feel confident in myself, in my own skin. And as I said, it was challenging how long that it was taking. There were times when I told myself nothing's happening, because it was so slow. Like it was like I was just shaving like a little bit of fat off at a time. It was so agonizingly slow for someone who is so impatient. And there were times I would go back. I have a podcast that I would listen to that would pretty much say the same thing to me. You know, it's happening. Even if you can't see it from day to day, it is happening. You just trust the process and keep going. And that would just get me to the next check-in. So the things that I would suggest is maybe even coming back to this and listening to what I've got to say about, it's going to take some time. It is happening if you're doing these things. Remember, it's a law of science. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. So if you are in a small deficit, then you're not going to put your muscle mass at risk, and you will be losing body fat. It's just going to take time. So having some accountability along the way, some ways of measuring it, is really helpful, and more than just the scale. Remember, the scale is not telling the whole story. I could weigh exactly the same weight and have much less body fat and just look and feel completely different. Having a plan for after, I really do think that We know that we require more protein as we age to keep our muscles on our body. We know our muscles are so important in protecting our bones and our joints, keeping us upright, keeping us mobile, helping prevent metabolic disease, helping us manage the sugar so that we don't become insulin resistant. So muscle mass, healthy muscle mass is the key. Resistance exercise 2 or 3 days a week, whatever that looks like for you. Try to find something that you enjoy or can tolerate, knowing that you're going to get all these benefits. And as long as you're getting stronger, you are moving in the right direction. That needle is moving. Make sure that you have enough fiber. That's also helping underneath with all of those metabolic things, helping your gut work better, helping to protect you again from metabolic diseases. Making sure that you're prioritizing your sleep, doing everything you can to clean that up. And if you're still struggling, see your GP to see if there's anything that needs to be investigated a bit further or any way that they can help you manage your sleep. The gold standard for insomnia is CBTI, which is a cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. So that could even be an option for you if you're suffering from insomnia. Hormone treatment may be a discussion that you want to have with your doctor. That was certainly very helpful for me in helping get me to a place where I could actually then do the work that I needed to do. Testosterone is indicated for postmenopausal women who have a low libido. So if that's you, again, worth another discussion with your doctor. Lots of options, my friends, lots of ways to avoid sitting back and just taking it and enjoying the snacking. So I hope it's been helpful, and I hope you too will opt to thrive. And remember, if you have found it helpful and you can think of someone else who might find it helpful, please pass the podcast along. And don't forget to rate and review, because when you rate and review the podcast, it makes it visible for other people when they're looking for this information. Have a great week, everyone.
The Opt to Thrive podcast is designed for information purposes only and is not engaged in the giving of medical advice. The information provided on the podcast should not be used for diagnosing or treating a health problem or disease. In no way should the information provided by Opt to Thrive be considered medical advice, and at all times the advice of a medical professional should supersede recommendations from Opt to Thrive. If you have or suspect you may have a health problem, you should consult your healthcare provider. The views expressed in this podcast are purely that of Dr. Sims and do not in any way reflect those of the institutions she contracts with medical services to.
Thank you for listening to Opt to Thrive. If you've enjoyed listening, please rate and share the podcast. You can visit our website at opttothrive.com and leave a comment for any subjects you would like to hear more about.